That is
I don't think it's coming through the mic. So don't worry.
okay.
All right. Hey, y'all. Pastor Emil here with another episode of Sweet Jesus. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet, but Jesus is far, far sweeter. I hope you have got something delicious and tasty, a dessert of some kind. Ice cream is my favorite. Maybe it's a piece of pie, maybe it's a cookie, maybe it's a cake, cupcake, something like that. But get something and come on in here and join us as we talk about Jesus. I'm here with my friend Ann. Ann has been coming to Open Arms for about how long?
I get surprised. It's been like a year. Huh?
About a year. And sort of connected to Open Arms probably for a lot longer than that, certainly through the people at Open Arms. And she is mustering up all kinds of courage to be here live and to record this and put it out there. She has got one heck of a story, and I'm not sure we're going to get to all of it today. But I wanted Ann to come in here and share her story because I think it's a lot like the story of a lot of folks. She's had a series of bad religious experiences. Is that fair to say?
Would be fair.
That's fair. Some bad family experiences, bad upbringing, childhood experiences, unpleasant maybe. She has been very far from God and far from the church, or at least felt that way. She's been fearful of God and the church.
That's an understatement.
She's had what I would call distorted views of God. That's something I've talked a little bit about with David Rodriguez, for any of you that have tuned into some of those episodes. And she actually used the word shame as something that kept her from church at one point. And but she's been coming pretty regularly. And I think it's a powerful story that is a story that a lot of people might benefit from. And so that's why I kind of twisted her arm and coerced her into joining us here today. I have some ice cream. Ann does not have some ice cream. I have peanut butter party. It's a Blue Bunny flavor. It's actually really good. And I got a whole bunch here because I want Ann to talk. And when I have ice cream, I'm usually too busy eating the ice cream to be talking.
Well, there you go.
And so this is going to allow you to hear from Ann. But Ann, I'm going to start out with the question I ask everybody, and that is, what's so sweet about Jesus?
And that question really stumped me when you said it the first time, because I couldn't really say what made Jesus sweet to me because I was so detached and didn't really have an idea that I was, a child of God. And then when I thought about it, I said, well, he does a lot for other people, works for them, like people that, have the courage to put their worries in the hands of the Lord. I was always, we've made a number of bad jokes in private with friends about, don't worry, just put your troubles in the hands of the Lord. Yeah, that's going to work, so I was just really removed from the whole idea of what Jesus does for people. I think I was just kind of soured to religion by a number of events in my life. And I started coming to church with friends, my friend Laurie and Mark Becknell, and it was just to spend time with them, basically. I wouldn't actually come to service. Even when Pastor Rod was here, I wouldn't enter the sanctuary because I was ready to turn into a pillar of salt or something crazy, waiting for the lightning to strike, and I just kept coming. And then when you started, like Lori's like, oh, just come to church. I developed a heart condition, actually. And I think Lori was worried that because I had a close relationship with Jesus, that I wasn't going to make it into heaven, and she didn't want to be there without me. That, I swear that's the whole, how it started. You better get you behind the church, Ann. And so I reluctantly entered the sanctuary. I sit in the back row. I deal with my anxiety issues, and a lot of people see me, coloring in my adult coloring book, trying not to look at other people, trying to stay focused on what I'm doing and not freak out. So there you go. And it's gotten a little easier just because it's become a habit, And then while I'm coloring, I started hearing Emil talk. And some of the things he said kind of stuck with me. And I said, well, that's a different way of looking at it, the whole church Jesus thing, And I've even maybe come to a point now where, maybe I could be part of that number. Not sure I'm ready to go there yet, but that's just, I've definitely seen a different perspective that, when you walk into the sanctuary, people are there, you feel community, you feel comfortable and welcomed. When you walk into a Catholic church, there's the big scary guy on the cross looking down at the sinners, and you want to run from the building, So that's kind of how it started.
Wow, there's a lot in there.
And he only had 3 bites.
Yeah, I still got more. So, so you're still kind of in this place where, well, Jesus seems really cool, but just not for people like me. Are you still there?
I think I'm still there, yeah.
Okay.
Like a little less, I don't feel, I've done a lot of personal work on myself in my own life. I've done a lot of, a lot of therapy, clocked a lot of couch time, worked on myself. But it was never from a spiritual perspective. It was all about accepting myself and who I was and decisions I've made. And I'm 57 years old, and I don't feel like I'm the worst person in the world anymore, but I don't know if I'm one of that number that's going to make it through the pearly gates, I'm in the back row still.
The back row, yes. Well, I think Jesus liked to hang out with the people in the back row.
Well,
Go ahead.
I don't know. That was in your sermons. And it's funny because people, I'm sure, are thinking, oh, she's just coloring to avoid listening. But I actually listen to your sermons and there were a few things that stuck with me. And then one time you had mentioned the story about when the prostitute comes in and Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and they were all appalled because she had entered the room. And who let her in here? Who's this, person? Why is she here? And he said, well, Jesus said, well, y'all need to be more like her. Y'all think y'all are, godlike, and, you need to be more genuine or whatever, So it kind of stuck with me that you don't have to be perfect or good in order to have God's grace. And that was always my feeling. And that was a big part of why I kind of got away from going to church. I was raised Catholic. My mother was very devout. And I went to Catholic high school. My grammar school, I went to a Protestant grammar school. They were Church of Christ, where, dancing was a sin and drinking was a sin. Mm-hmm. Everything was a sin, and we're all going to burn, all of us, no matter what. And coupled with the Catholic guilt that, if you don't follow church dogma and you dare to step out or sin, you got to go to see the little guy in the box and confess your sins. And it just got to be too much. And I just, had a bad enough, idea of who I was. And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't want to be hypocritical. Like, in other words, okay, good people go to church, bad people don't. And I kind of fell into the other category where I didn't. And that went over for a lot of years, like my whole really young adult life. I just didn't participate at all. Even though I'm confirmed Catholic, I just was completely turned off by the Catholic religion. And a lot of the Protestant religions were worse. Just because they were, so fundamental, and, you step out God knows I drink and dance. What the hell? So, that kind of threw me out with the bathwater. Man,
you really had a terrible set of experiences.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you,
So you lived footloose, right?
Yes.
In your Protestant grammar school?
Grammar school, yes.
Wow, that's
well,
really...
I was Catholic, so, and especially Church of Christ, they believe unless you're Church of Christ, you're not saved. So I was a sinner Catholic that they allowed to join the pack, because I was surprised I even got into school. I don't know if my parents, I don't know whose palm they patted, but my sister, my brother, and I went to their school.
Wow.
But we were Catholic, so we were the odd men out. So we already had, that. And I mean, I'm studying Bible verse. We did PE and Bible class. So I had the Catholics on Saturday at catechism, and I had them all week. And all I knew was that I didn't make the cut in either arena. So that was started. And then I went to Catholic high school. I went to an all-girl Catholic high school. And that was an interesting experience. But I was I think it was after high school that I really made a split with religion. I felt like it was, it had been crammed down my throat enough that I just, if you didn't follow the dogma of the Catholic Church, like premarital sex or birth control, or God forbid, were not pro-life, that if you dared to be pro-choice, you were a sinner too. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there were a lot of issues coming through high school that really separated me from feeling like I was part of the chosen bunch.
Chosen bunch, yeah. Mm-hmm. So you said something like, good people go to church and bad people don't. What made you think a good person... Well, it's going
the thing
to church.
Is, it started off with the Catholics, because if you had sinned and had not been to confession, you could not receive the Eucharist, or you should not receive the Eucharist. And I didn't want to tell the guy in the box the whole story. So therefore, that's where I took the split, okay? Yeah. And if you didn't confess and if you didn't participate in communion, you just didn't go to church. Like, you just, it just got to where you just like, I'm not going. Why go if you're not going to participate? And I felt hypocritical, because a lot of the behaviors I was doing and going through were definitely against what the Catholics believe should be done or not done. And so if you were a sinner, there really wasn't a place for you. And if you were kind of lying about it. So I didn't want to be a liar. I'd rather be a sinner than a liar. So I bailed out.
Billy Joel. Right, laugh with the sinners and
cry with the saints. That's right. Yeah. So I bailed out on it, and like I said, and you surround yourself with people that are like you. And a lot of my friends had been through similar experiences with the Catholics, and we never connect. We always said we're going to have a class action suit against the Pope for mental anguish. And all that tuition wasted.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much. Have you ever heard, have we talked about this, maybe, this idea of what the church is really? Like, because the way you're describing it, it sounds like the church is made up of all the people that have it together.
Mm-hmm. Or think they have it together.
And ultimately that's the truth, right? Nobody has it together. Not a single person.
But they don't like to admit that. The nuns and the priests and the hierarchy in the church, they who set the rules, and they're God-like in their minds, I guess. I don't know. But they're good at the shame and blame game. I remember one time in high school, I'll never forget this as long as I live. They had this panel of nuns and priests that came to talk about pro-life, and that how anyone, and they're talking to a room of 300 girls, high school girls, and how many of those girls you think had abortions? And these people come up and they say, oh, well, abortion's a sin, and, hellfire, brimstone, I'll save you the details. But it was like this condemning, if you do this, you're condemned to hell, and nothing you can do will ever be right in your life. I mean, they were really laid it on. And our principal, who was a really cool guy, who now has come out as being gay, years and years later. So I'm sure he was going through his own personal stuff. He stepped up and said, well, what about absolution? What about penance and absolution? It was like this, it hit them like a brick, like they didn't know what to say. Like, I guess the Catholic Church, to me, it's more like an Old Testament, God-like, patriarchal God. There's not a lot of, at least it didn't connect to me, that there's no preaching of Jesus, about New Testament, that here comes Jesus. He's going to maybe make the wrongs right and give everybody a fair shot, But I'm telling you, I knew, I had friends who had to make that difficult choice in high school. And for them to sit up there and shame them and basically tell them that they are condemned to hell because of the situation, that the choices they've made with no hope of absolution. And it took my gay principal to stand up and say, hey, well, look, maybe we don't all have all the answers, and let's let God judge.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I find appealing about Open Arms is that, you preach more of Jesus' love, and that it gives people a fighting chance. You don't have to be perfect to worship. You don't have to be perfect to be here. And whether or not you get in or not is not up to you. It's up to Jesus and God, which I thought was pretty cool.
It is up to Jesus and God. And
not the man in the robe at the altar who thinks he's better than everybody else.
I'm definitely not better than everybody else. I have plenty of stories. But I think there are probably people that will listen to this that are more pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that what you're describing is exactly why it's been hard for me, even though I would say that the better choice is not abortion.
Correct.
But that people find themselves in these situations that seem hopeless.
Yes.
And they're looking for a way out. I'm not sure that we should be promoting it as an option, but we certainly shouldn't be creating an environment where people think that having an abortion, especially likely because it's in most women's past, right? If they've had one, that there's no possible redemption.
That your life would ever be right. Yeah. Like, in other words, they used it. It was kind of like a deterrent. Hell's waiting for you if you dare to make this mistake. And here's all these girls that are lost and feeling guilty, and because they're raised Catholic. And I mean, I personally, I'm not an advocate of abortion. I'm kind of conflicted in the pro-choice choice. But being that I've been close to people who've had to make those decisions and choices, it really impacted me. Like, I should not judge them, and neither should anybody else. That's their journey with Jesus and God. And that's where the judgment should happen.
Well, and the way you describe that entire thing, I had no idea we were talking about.
How do we get on this, right?
Pro-choice stuff.
Yeah.
But the way you describe that whole thing, I forget what the exact statistic is, but there is some overwhelming majority of people that have abortions are Christians. And there's a sermon I preached a few years ago now, a couple of years ago, where it was on like Pro-Life Sunday. And I talked about, hey, abortion is probably not a good thing, but hey, did you know that like 75% of the abortions are had by people like you in this room right now? And why do you think that is? Well, it's because you scared the daylights out of them, and they're not going to tell you about the fact they made a mistake.
Correct. They would rather face fire and brimstone than tell their Catholic parents that they made a mistake.
Exactly.
And that's the truth.
And in my opinion, that is about the furthest thing from Jesus that you could ever possibly describe. Making someone feel like the fact that they screwed up means they're done.
Right.
Because Jesus over and over again talks to people that have screwed up royally, and they know it, and said, hey, come on in. Right. And then to the people that think they haven't screwed up, which they have, right? They just put on the nice image, right? They put on the fancy robes, or they show up at church and they smile and they tell everybody about how great life is, and
or they'll put money in the basket to give you funds to buy food so you can go out and feed the homeless. Yeah. But they don't want the homeless in their backyard.
Yeah.
Or on the benches in front of their church.
Yeah. Yep.
Or God forbid, let them in the church.
Are you talking about Axel?
Could be talking about my buddy Axel. I sure could. Even if it was a little smelly, I can understand that to some degree. But
we offered him showers.
Yes, and like I said, I mean, it's Axel turned out to be a really sad story. That I guess he just some people are fatally wounded, and you can bring them to salvation, and they just won't drink. Yeah.
Well, I'm not so sure. I'm worried about his salvation. I think he might
have just moved on. I like to think, I tell Lori that all the time. It's all that, maybe he found a new beginning somewhere else.
Well, see, he's still struggling with, I think, failure.
Hmm.
He's more worried about his failure than we are.
I'm sure.
And
Self-loathing at its best.
yeah, yeah.
And it's funny because when I started coming to church is when Lori had kind of taken Axel under her wing. And Axel and I showed up at church the kind of like the, same time, And I'm telling you what, I felt like Axel. You know what I mean? Like I had no more business being him and I hanging out in the back,
But that's the view of church I was talking about, right? Is church a place for all the people that have it together, or is church a place for all the people that are in desperate need of something?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So is it a museum for saints or a hospital for sinners? That's one way that it's kind of
That's a good
familiar.
analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people use that,
Mhm.
and I think it's a hospital for sinners. Now there are certain things that if I did them, it would probably mean the end of my ministry.
Do you think you're that bad?
And
That you've
no,
been that
I'm
bad?
not. I'm not saying I'm gonna do those things, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying, there are real life consequences for our sins.
Hmm.
And
I agree.
we make bad choices sometimes, and a lot of those choices do have to do with our upbringing, our relationship with our parents, whether we even have parents. There are people that get a really rough start to life, and even if they meet Jesus and he does make it better, they still got a long way to go. I mean, there is some sense in which there are more polished people than others, but all of that's grace. If every one of us had the same start in life, we'd all probably look a lot more alike. But since it's so different for so many different people, and the struggle to overcome some of those experiences, like Axel, like you talked about, and you and others who have had those really terrible early experiences with church and religion, it takes a lot to stop making choices that are actually bad for you, right? So God gives us these rules. I don't think because he's trying to be this mean taskmaster, right? He is saying, hey, by the way, like, if you guys live more like this, life is going to be a lot better for you. It's just going to go better. But, oh, by the way, you're not. Like, you're going to keep screwing this up every day. That's why I'm sending my son. Right? So reach for the stars, knowing that no matter what, you got that nice safety net underneath. Like, you can strive for anything. Jesus actually comes and he takes the rules and he makes them even harder. Like he says, you think it's supposed to be that you don't murder? Actually, you shouldn't even be angry with your brother or sister. It's the same thing. And he says, you think adultery's bad? You shouldn't even look at another person and think lustfully. And why does he say that? Is he saying it to be a jerk? No, I think he's saying it to the people that think they've got it all right. They're just as bad as everybody else.
Right. Like you could always be better, in a sense, too.
And they need a savior as much as you or I do, right? The polished people, they need it just as much. The law's a lot harder than they think. But, there are these consequences, like if you go rob somebody, you might get shot. Right? Like the business owner might have a gun behind there, and if he feels threatened, and you're done, right? You cheat on someone, you commit adultery, right? I mean, that spouse. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned is an expression, or a man scorned. The same, I think. Those things produce terrible consequences.
Yes.
and can make a mess of your life. But that doesn't change the way God feels about us, because we're all in different stages of spiritual growth. We're all in different stages of the journey from wherever we happen to start to where we're going. And I think Jesus just wants us all to know that no matter where we are on that scale or spectrum that everyone wants to use, He loves us. He died. He died for you too, by the way.
So you say
It-
over to every Sunday.
Well,
No, but it's true. I'm like, repetition, it starts to sink in,
Jesus died for sinners, right? And you just profess to be a sinner, right?
Mhm.
So there you go.
There you go. But I remember being young and my mother, Anne-Marie, you just have no faith. And it's true. I'm thinking, well, you just beat the faith right out of me. You know what I'm saying? There's no hope, You're hopeless. You have no faith. But I find later, like I said, later in life circumstances happen and you get through difficult times and then you realize, maybe he was more involved than I thought. Maybe it is part of the plan and I'm just starting to get the message, But I don't have, I'm on my own as an adult. When you're young and you're coming up in a dysfunctional home and you're in a crazy Catholic environment with, these patriarchal, nuns and priests who said, you're not perfect, you're this, you're that, and they're tearing you down when you're just trying to find out who you are. I would have been anybody's anything because I didn't know who I was. Mm-hmm. And that took a lot of work.
Yeah. How much of that, your experience with church, how much of that do you think was filtered through your childhood and your...
Oh, definitely from my parents. Because like I said, going through therapy, we had these discussions of, like dealing with my parents and stuff and my idea of who I was as a child and, where I was off the path because, I was a handful. But it was kind of like, I saw my parents were very, very, like I developed a very patriarchal sense of God because, my parents, it was like a blind devotion. You do what I say because this is the right thing because I'm your parent. Not because of, they're not the time out kind of bunch. Mm. It was more, do as I say, don't embarrass me, don't get pregnant, and God forbid, don't ever, don't get pregnant or don't come home, that kind of thing. Wow. So they parented out of fear, basically, which I know now is fear. But at the time, you feel like it's, because you're not good enough or wasn't right, perfect. And so I think you develop your sense of a deity by how your parents treat you. Mm. So, I mean, in Catholic school, it was, you follow these rules because God said, this is the path and stay on it. My parents, you're not going to be a florist. You're not going to be a hairdresser. You're going to college because you're going to pay your own rent one day, and I can't fault my parents. I mean, like I said, people, parents are not perfect. You see them as you get older as people, not so much parents. But yeah, I definitely think that as kids who are developing their sense of or relationship with Jesus, my parents never talked about Jesus. It was God. You sin, you're going to hell. So don't sin. Mm. And I sinned. I disobeyed. I was rebellious. I had my own mind. And to them, that was not good behavior. You're supposed to conform and do what I was told to do.
So do you think they thought they didn't sin?
I don't know.
Because the way you just said that, if you sin, you go to hell, so don't sin.
Well, I think my mother should have been a nun. And she used to say that all the time while she was beating a pot on the counter when she was angry with us. I've ruined my life having kids. I should have been a nun. So maybe she fell short too. But I think the Catholics did a number on her too. And we didn't recognize that as kids. But she, I don't know how she got married instead of going to the convent. And then you had 3 kids. I mean, you would have figured out what caused that. If you didn't like the first one, why would you have 2 more? But they did. So I just, and they both, my dad too. My dad was raised in the church, and it was just this blind devotion. And how she really thought about herself, she never really shared with me, other than she just wasted her life raising kids. She couldn't have went to college after she had them. I don't know.
Yeah, so when she said you're going to college, it was more like...
She's going to go to college,
yeah,
right? And my sister, my sister really excelled academically. And my mother pushed her to, her accomplishments were my mother's accomplishments, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And my sister excelled at everything. I, not so much, was the middle child. So therefore, that's a book in itself, I'm sure. And my brother was the youngest. He was the Messiah.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah, but no, I was kind of the middle child misfit, you know, didn't quite work out well.
So a lot of what you're describing, makes Jesus, it makes Christianity, religion seem like it's all about changing our behavior, right? Would you say that that's true? Like the way you described your upbringing, it's like trying to make people behave,
Yes.
right?
Or follow the norm, because that's what makes a successful human. You know, if you're good and this is God's plan, you follow God's plan, you earn enough points, go to church on Sundays, and don't sin, you'll make it into heaven.
Hmm.
It was kind of that, it was always, goal driven, how they thought. And that's because that's how they were raised,
Well, and I find that we as human beings are like naturally wired to think this way because it's kind of how the world works, right? Like if you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of idea. Even with our kids, like, I hope we're not parenting totally out of fear. Excuse me, that ice cream is catching up with me. I don't think we're parenting out of fear, but there is like, hey, you get more responsibility if you demonstrate more responsibility, right? So it's just like, well, if I do this, I'm going to get that. If I do this, I'm going to get that. In the working environment, work world, business world, right? If I do these things, I get this reward, right? And so we take that idea and then we put it on God and say, well, if this is how it works here, if I save enough money, yeah, I can buy that bike or I can buy that new video game system. And then the same thing about getting a house. And if I do all these things to get successful, and then you get to God and God says, good luck. Like,
yeah, but it comes down to where I see you, in the steps that you say about how you raise your children. And it comes from an unconditional love you have for your children as a parent. And my parents' love was completely conditional.
Conditional, yeah.
To good behavior, to, being successful academically, successful monetarily as a professional. It was all, conditional, where I think that you and Heather sound like much more grounded parents because your kids don't have to be perfect. You're just hoping they find their way. And like you said, you raise a moral person who's looking to help their neighbor and treat people like they want to be treated. That's a much healthier outlook on rearing children than this, shame them with fear. And, fear and shame doesn't produce as positive result. It's like, and that's what I felt like I was raised. It was like shame and fear. That was the two main,
It's a struggle though. I mean,
yeah.
You'd be surprised how easy it is to start living kind of like vicariously through your kids and wanting really good things for your kids. And then especially like you see other families, other parents, what they do for their kids. And this is what I was getting at earlier about how like we are just wired to like try to achieve, try to compare to other people. Well, if they're doing this, well then I should do this, and like I want to be good like them. Like we do that without parents treating it that way, or pastors and priests and religious systems doing it that way, which by the way, I do have some Catholic friends who come in here actually sometimes, and it's not just the Catholic Church that screws this up. Although I do agree the Catholic Church screws it up.
More than the average church.
But I'm not sure that all of them have screwed it up exactly the way you have.
Yeah.
Church structures, church denominations, there are so many people and so many, there is a wide variety of experience there, because I've met some Catholic folks that are not neurotic and
crazy,
crazy
right,
like
right,
you.
right, yeah, there you go. No, but I'm a prime product, But I think the fact that the church hierarchy, just the way the Catholics, they don't elevate women. A nun has to, she has poverty, chastity, and obedience to look forward to in her life. And then the priest can go fishing on a yacht, go marlin fishing and drink beer while he's doing it, and that's all fine and good. And he's like that's okay.
Mm.
I mean, that just wasn't okay to me. Like, how come she gets 2 pairs of shoes and he gets to go party every weekend?
Yeah.
He wears the robe and it's his way or no way. And but he can't have sex or children, and then supposed to be in touch with people who are living their life, rearing children.
Mm.
And these poor women that are locked in a convent, married to Jesus. That's insanity.
Well, I was trained at a Lutheran seminary, so Martin Luther married a nun. He was a monk who married a nun.
Married a nun. Yeah.
So if anyone's out, he is, and so are we.
Yeah, right.
Right. Oh yeah, no. There's. I would say that they do probably overdo that. That the chastity thing is not exactly the ideal. I think the Apostle Paul, he says, "Hey, I wish that everyone was like me," and you get the impression that that's not married, but we don't really know that for sure entirely. Actually, I think there's a debate. But hey, some of you are gonna be filled with lust, burning with desire, so get married, because it's better to be married and have a spouse that you can engage in sexual activity with than to not have a spouse and just go everywhere and no commitment and no, right? Like that's way worse. So yeah, you should probably start getting married, right? That was kind of the take I get from that passage there. Mm-hmm. He's not speaking specifically to men of the cloth, so to speak, but I don't know that there was that kind of class of people at the time. They're still kind of finding their way as the Christian church as opposed to Judaism.
I don't know.
So,
and like I said, I really don't know where I fall in the spectrum, but the cloth thing is definitely a turn off. The robe.
So I won't be putting on robes anytime soon? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, if you want to, that's fine. Now that I know you. But if I would have met you and you were in the robe, I promise you we wouldn't be eating ice cream and talking on a podcast. The robe I think it would definitely set people like me. It would be more difficult to approach.
So you talked again about, and we talked a little bit about, Jesus has done all these things for everybody else, but not me. What is everything that he's done? What do you see that? Well,
I think just the fact that people have a place to put their worry. The bottom falls out of your life. You say, okay, well, Jesus has a plan. It's just a rough patch. Okay, yeah, I got to keep going. It gives you, hope. It gives you hope that things can get better. Where if you don't have a relationship with Jesus and life goes to, the bottom falls out of life, it's up to you. You're by yourself. You're on your own. There's no way to put your worry other than internalize it, and then you develop anxiety disorders and gastric disorders and all the crap I'm dealing with right now. If you had somebody that, it's like an unconditional loving parent in a sense that, your parents, like normal families, kids that have a good relationship with their parents say, well, my mother loves me. Nobody loves me like my mama. That's as foreign to me in concept as me saying, okay, Jesus loves me no matter what. So it takes time to have, that idea that, well, maybe there is some place to put my worry and see past the difficult time that this is going to work out. I just got to keep on putting one foot in front of the other. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what I think he does for most people that have that faith, is that it allows them to get through difficult times and see that there is a hope for a better future.
But not for you.
I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I have been. That, you just have to have faith that it's going to keep working out, And I only had faith in myself because I felt like I was walking alone. Now I'm a little bit more open to the idea that maybe, I can keep hanging out with the good folks. I'll figure it out, I guess. I don't know. We'll see.
The good folks. Uh-oh. Yeah, we're not that good. Just remember that. We all need Jesus.
Okay.
And what about like the guilt and the shame and the hey, I've been really, really bad. So do you
See, there
see?
lies the problem because when you fail to change behavior from bad behavior to good behavior, that's where shame comes in.
Mm,
That you failed as a person because you aren't able to stick to the diet or stop drinking or stop using drugs or whatever it is that your vice is to help you through those bad times. That's how addicts are formed. It's
mm,
that people that are addicts by nature are usually kind people that have been dealt a crappy hand, in my view. At least the people I know that struggle with it.
yeah.
Their self-loathing is way up here, and they can't get past it because they keep screwing up. They need constant redemption, like your song says,
Yeah.
And if you don't finally get when does God really give up? You screw up enough times, maybe you're not worth saving, So I think that's where a lot of people just give up. And they're not willing to make the changes they have to, Either they feel too weak to do it or whatever, but I think that's where the shame comes in.
Mm. Well, I think Jesus, there isn't a time when you stop sinning.
See, that's where I can't wrap my head around. Like, you got to reach
Like,
enlightenment eventually, or you should. If you want to get into heaven or if you want to make it into,
well, it's not
I don't
it's
know.
not a Lutheran view, right? So
Okay.
part of what Martin Luther brought to the world was a very clear understanding of just how terrible we all really are. So,
Right.
Here's a guy who would confess his sin. He did all the Catholic stuff you were talking about and more. He did it better than everyone else, actually. And they were all kind of like, why are you still obsessing about this? Would you just stop? Hurry up, finish the prayer so I can come in and do my little thing and drop my money in the thing and get my points on the
Right.
scorecard, right? And he's like, no, but I have to really mean this and so many other things. And he's he's confessing his sins for like 6 hours at a time.
Wow.
Could you imagine being the person listening to that? And then he does it every day. And then finally the guy says, Martin, come back when you actually have something to confess. He didn't have these massive sins, right? He wasn't a monk who had gone off to the brothel and
Right.
had his fill of whatever they could provide, right? He didn't do that. He wasn't murdering anyone. He wasn't doing all these big things that we often think about. And yet he still found a way to sit there for 6 hours talking about how
he could have been better.
He could have been better, how he dishonored God, how his thoughts were impure, how he hated God for the fact that he was in charge and bossing everybody around and all kinds of things. And then finally he realized there's no way out of this. There is no, I will never be good enough. And not only will I never be good enough, this whole charade is just making me hate God more and more. Until finally he just says, oh, wait a second. The Bible says that it's by grace you're saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It's a gift from God so that no one can boast, so that the guy in the fancy robes can't boast about being in the fancy robes and having it all together. Not a single person on the planet can say, I've got it all together. So the person you're striving for or looking for or striving to be doesn't exist.
Gee, thanks, Abel. That's really encouraging to know.
But it is. It is, right? And so I think what you're describing is something that ultimately points to God. We all want to be beautiful. We want to be presentable. We want to be acceptable. We want to fit in, right? This isn't like you, Ann, are the only person that deals with this. I deal with it too. I'm not really a church guy, right? Like I didn't grow up in the church. And I look back at my time at the seminary and I wonder why it was like so conflicted. Like I felt like I was in, but I wasn't really in, Oh, because all these other guys had been raised in the church and they had all their cliques. They went to the same colleges. They went to the same high schools, and they knew all the same people. And here I was, brand new to the denomination, and all I knew was the church that I was at for like a couple of years, maybe tops, and my wife. And it made me like crap. And I didn't realize it until later. And part of it was because I used to tell them too, like I'm from New York. So I'd say, hey, why are you being an idiot again? Like I don't, so that didn't help me. But we all want to fit in somewhere. We all want to be acceptable. And the word I think the Bible uses for that is righteous, righteousness. We want to be perfect. We have this desire to be perfect because God made us to be perfect. But of course, you know, Adam and Eve screwed that up.
I say Eve had to eat the dang apple, right?
Yeah. Well, Adam is blamed, though. Adam is generally the one blamed.
They start the ball rolling down the hill, let's just say.
Just as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive, right? It's not Eve, it's Adam who kind of gets the blame. As in Adam all have sinned. But so the Bible says that God made him who knew no sin, Jesus, the one who knew no sin, the only one who's perfect, who knew no sin, to become sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So in Jesus, we are presentable. We are perfect. We are part of the club. Jesus is the guy who, and actually the Bible talks about a robe. Maybe you won't like this. But in baptism, we have clothed ourselves with Christ, Paul says, Galatians 3:27. And then at the very end, in Revelation, it talks about those who have been clothed in this beautiful white robe that's been washed in the blood of the Lamb, right? So when God looks at us, he sees Jesus. We're wearing Jesus, right?
Okay.
And that is so.
I have to soften my vision of the robe.
Yeah, well, it's an old school thing, but
Right.
I think it helps, because what is a robe? And that's why they started using robes, at least in some of the denominations and things, because when you put on the robe, it's not me.
Right, you bathed in Jesus.
It's Jesus. I'm fulfilling a role. Now, of course, we all abuse that, right? Like, hey, look, I get a robe, I look fancy, I'm different than you, right? That's what people do. People screw it up always. They will always use something that they have and you don't have to say, look at how much, because we're all trying to be better. We're all trying to be presentable. We're all trying to be acceptable, to be righteous, to be perfect. And we pick on all these things instead of just saying, hey, I'm in Jesus and that's all I need. Only then is when we stop belittling people, and even then it's a lifelong effort that is never quite fulfilled, you know. But that's for you too, you know.
Okay. Duly noted.
It's for anyone. It's you know, you'd mentioned the story of the prostitute that shows up at this Pharisee's house. Jesus tells him to be like her, not her to be like him. Zacchaeus. And we talked about Zacchaeus ever? I think maybe on a Sunday. He's a little guy, and he can't see Jesus. Jesus is coming through Jericho, so he climbs up in a tree, and he's like, "Oh, look, Jesus!" And Jesus says, "Hey, Zacchaeus, get down here. I'm going to stay at your house today." Zacchaeus is a tax collector, so he's like the most hated. I mean, just being a tax collector is pretty. I mean,
tough job. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, you're. Nobody likes to pay taxes. There's not a single person on the planet that likes to pay taxes. But it's even worse when you're a Jew, and the taxing body is the Romans, the Gentile, non-religious, non-holy people, right? So he's working for the enemy. And he's robbing them and keeping the difference between what he owes Caesar, right? And he's building himself this lavish lifestyle. People hate tax collectors, right? And Jesus says, I want to hang out with you. I'm coming to your house. I'm hanging out with the folks in the back row
There you go.
who sneak in and sneak out, like Zacchaeus. Maybe he showed up at the temple, but he was kind of like, nobody really wants to talk to me, so I'll come late and I'll leave early.
There you go.
You know, but that's who Jesus is for. Jesus isn't for the people that think they have it all together. Jesus is for the people that know they don't have it all together and are willing to say, I need something because I can't do it. So is Jesus for you? That depends. Do you think you're somebody that needs something?
I got my list right here.
You need help?
Yeah.
You're not going to get in on your own?
Right. Well, I've been putting some cards in the basket. I'm learning to take a leap of faith, So I've been, creeping my way in that direction.
Okay. Well, it's for you. Because if it's not for you, then it's not for me either. I mean, that's kind of how it works. Like if there's anything that's a prerequisite or condition, then nobody gets in.
Nobody gets in.
Right? Like I would rather say that the worst person on the planet right now, whoever that happens to be, whoever you think that is, I would rather say that person has a shot because that's the way it has to be for me to get in.
That sounds pretty fair, yeah.
Yeah. So not a lot of people like that though.
Right, I'm sure.
Any last thoughts? We don't want to make you late for your
work, yeah.
Your shift.
No, but that was interesting.
Learn anything new?
Yeah, I guess. Some new stuff. It's like that's why I hang out on Sundays. There's always something new.
Always something new. Well, that's why we like to keep it like that.
Yeah.
Right. Same old gets old fast.
True.
I get bored too. So what are we going to do that's different this week? I don't know. What are we going to do that's different that doesn't get me thrown out?
Well, there you go. That's right.
So, all right. Well, thanks for coming in. Thanks for mustering up the courage and overcoming the guilt, the shame, the anxiety, the worry, all those things. And I hope you're getting a different picture of God. And I hope whoever's listening is getting a different picture of God.
I hope so too.
And hey, y'all, Anne is not the only one. There are so many people like this. And the people that hate us the most, that hate Christians and church people the most, are people that have probably had experiences like this. So just keep that in mind, that what you're saying to them and the conversations you're having and the things you post on Facebook, and they're filtering it through the experiences that Anne described. So if it's all about making people behave, fine, if that's what you think. But if it's really the biblical Jesus about connecting people to God because they can't behave,
There you go.
well, then maybe we need to rethink our approach. So,
Ready.
All right. Hey, y'all, great to be with you. Make sure you like and share and subscribe and all those good things. And we will catch up with you later. Maybe have Ann back for follow-up conversation.